were calling from the glen, and the country found them ready at the stirring call for men. Let no tears add to their hardship as the soldiers pass along, and although your heart is breaking, make it sing this cheery.
So, it's Steph. Welcome back to the Cantina. I am just leaving the theater after seeing 1917. And I have so far seen 2 of the Oscar-nominated movies. I will probably try to get to see Jojo Rabbit somewhere, sometime, soon. 1917 and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I'm going to say this right now, are 2 movies that'll stay with you for the rest of your life. That's what Best Picture should be. And I have to go and look up the cast of 1917, but it is, without a doubt, literally one of the most beautifully made movies I've ever seen. I've never seen anything like it. The story is based on stories that Sam Mendes' grandfather told him when he was growing up. Sam Mendes and I kind of share something probably unique because his grandfather was a World War I veteran. My grandfathers were. My father was actually the World War II veteran, so there you go. It's hard to explain. If you know anything about the war, 1917, April of 1917, in France, it was the beginning of the Somme offensive. Maybe it was. I gotta look it up. But it was beginning of more hard fighting that they'd gone than the guys in the trenches had seen. I studied World War I in the air. There's a moment in World War I where the Germans, and World War I in the air was mostly about technology. He who had the newest airframe usually won the prize, unless, you were a great fighter pilot like Manfred von Richthofen, Eddie Rickenbacker. He who sits, the crate doesn't matter so much as the man who sits in it. That was something that von Richthofen would say when he was teaching his own pilots. 1917 began the rise, the ascendancy of the German Imperial Air Service. I've done papers on this. I've been to the Red Baron's house in Świdnica, Poland, back in those days when the Imperial German flag flew over it. It was called Schweidnitz. And I've seen it. Never didn't get to go inside, but I've seen it. So there you go. It's a remarkable thing to be able to say you've done this, you've seen this, you've been there. My thing, when you're watching the 1917 thing, you see the airplanes, you see the German get shot down, and all the rest of the stuff, and it gives the British, the RAF, they're just due. But April 1917 was called Bloody April for a reason. Von Richthofen's Jagdstaffel 11, Jasta 11, several others German squadrons almost single-handedly destroyed the British Air Service, the British Army Air Service, the RAF, for what it is. It's called Bloody April. And von Richthofen scored actually most of his victories in that time period. So 1917, of course, is from the British perspective. It is very much about the war on the ground, the trenches. I'll give you a little side history. If you ever want to know where Nazism got started, the death of humanity in Europe, the humanities, the beauty of what made European civilization so amazing. Go and see this movie. I have never in my life seen anything that depicts the trenches so grotesquely. I haven't, and it is remarkable in that respect. It is almost like turning back the clock back to a moment during a time, and I'm going to say this very bluntly, probably the worst catastrophe ever to hit Western civilization, even more so than World War II, because World War II was its baby. The trenches were inhumane. The war went on from 1914 till November of 1918 over basically 500 yards of earth. 10 million men, combined casualties, died in that war. Okay. The death of European civilization, the flower of Europe was destroyed. Fact. And it turned, I would say, a lot of young men into people they weren't necessarily supposed to become. When you look at World War One, I don't know where I'm going right here. When you look at World War One, it wasn't a war. It wasn't like how we got dragged into Pearl Harbor. Didn't start like that. I'll give you a little history lesson. Right before it started, the reason why it started was simply this. The Archduke of Austria-Hungary, Franz Ferdinand, was murdered with his wife, his morganatic wife, Sophie von Chotek, by members of the Serbian national terrorist group who call themselves the Black Hand. There's a guy, a terrorist named Gavrilo Princip, who is the most famous member of that merry band of douchebags. Okay, they threw grenades into the car, and I think they shot the Crown Prince of Austria-Hungary. What's interesting is that he never would have been the Crown Prince of Austria-Hungary if Crown Prince Rudolph, who was the son and heir to the Emperor of Austria-Hungary, Franz Ferdinand, and his wife, had not killed himself, and his girlfriend, Maria Vetsera, who was like 17 years old, in Meyerling. You want to see a good movie? There's a good movie about it. Omar Sharif plays Rudolph. Ava Gardner plays Empress Elizabeth. Empress Elizabeth was the Diana of the day. She was considered the most beautiful woman in the world, and I will put a picture of her at the end of this video. A painting, and I think those accolades were pretty much well earned, if you ask me. She was also the cousin of the Mad King of Bavaria, Ludwig II. And sorry, I've got some bottles on the bottom of this thing. And what's Ludwig II famous for? The castle in Bavaria, Neuschwanstein, that looks like Cinderella's castle. And a strange death. He drowned, supposedly, but I personally think he's murdered by the Prussian secret police because he was spending money like a nutbag, and Otto von Bismarck, the leader of Prussia, couldn't deal with him. He was, like I said, there's a reason. They call him the Mad King for a reason. Ludwig II. Okay, so we got all that, but that's the background. But so Franz Ferdinand is killed, and with his wife Sophie. She wasn't really recognized as his wife. She was more like a she was a morganatic wife because the crown wouldn't recognize her as being anybody important. So she was just kind of left there to be whatever. And they were murdered. And what you had in Europe was the Central Powers versus the Allied Powers. Central Powers were Germany, the German Empire, Austria-Hungary, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and Bulgaria, Italy for a little while. There were others. You can look that up. Central Powers. Allies were Britain, Russia, and France. Kind of sound familiar? Everyone took a side. The United States did not join World War I until the spring. It didn't really send troops till 1918, and we were there till it was over, and we really didn't suffer the full horror of it. But the Brits were desperate to get us in, as they always are. When something goes on in Europe and the Germans are waving the sword of war, the Brits and the French are like, come please help us. Please help us, Uncle Sam. Okay, whatever. So, 1917 in April, you've got the British RAF, Imperial Air Service, just getting wiped out by the Germans, not only because the Germans were flying superior airplanes at the time, and technology would turn on a dime. That's the thing about the war in the air in World War I. You could come up with a little gimmick for an airplane, and suddenly you'd be the high horse. And not every pilot is Richthofen, Eddie Rickenbacker. You name the British ace, the French ace. There were Italian aces. There were even Russian aces, till they decided to go commie and stop fighting. But the war in the trenches was different. There was some modicum of heroism in the skies above France. There was nothing like that in the trenches. This movie will show you what it's like. You will see bodies piled on top of bodies on top of bodies. You will see trench rats. You will see mud that you can't believe. You will see things that World War I, like I said, was the death of everything beautiful in Europe. And it died in places like that. Okay? This movie captures everything. And I'm going to say this, if I had to choose between Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and 1917, I gotta say, I picked 1917. It's probably one of the best war movies I've ever seen, if not the best. It was so well acted, I can't even. And the whole one continuous shot was just... I've never seen anything like it. I've never seen anything like it. Everything about this, from the writing, the acting, to the cinematography, to that one continuous shot, is glorious, epic filmmaking. And it brings out the horror of what our grandfathers, great-grandfathers, maybe great-great-grandfathers went through, if you are European, French, Brit, or German. Because it was bad for us and the Germans. A professor that I really liked when I was going to college would say often enough, the Nazis were born in the trenches of World War I. Were there any real bad guys? No. The real bad guys were the leaders of all the countries that fought, regardless of what side they were on. I don't really look at World War I like I look at World War II. World War One was a war that didn't have to start. It didn't have to happen. It was a war that never should have been. It was a war that should have sort of just been an alternate universe. Had it not happened, well, World War II might not have happened. Had it not happened, maybe the rise of secularism and socialism in Europe would not have happened. All right. World War One is a remarkable turning point, even bigger than World War II, because again, World War One was the gateway to World War II. There's a great book about culture in Europe before the war and during, like before it started, called The Rites of Spring. I highly recommend it. There are books about, tons of books about the Habsburg monarchy out there, very, very easily read. You want to know what World War One was like for the culture, for people living behind the lines. There are tons out there. Biographies of Marlene Dietrich, what it was like for her as a little kid and as a teenager growing up in Berlin. She lost, I think it was her father, I think, was killed. Or maybe it was her stepdad was killed in the war. And these young Germans came back from the trenches feeling defeated. Germany basically gets screwed by the Treaty of Versailles. They get blamed for everything. They have the entire bill for the war given to them. And they get the regions that would actually help them pay the reparations taken away from them. The Rhineland. Okay? That was a demilitarized zone between France and Germany. So you wonder why there was a lot of discontent going on. Of course, the Weimar Republic was one of the... If you want to see a weak government, study the Weimar Republic, okay? You want pure democracy, there you go. It doesn't work. Representative democracy, as we have in the United States, a representative republic, where everything is balanced through checks and balances, is the only way that you can get a democracy that works, where individual rights are respected over mob rule. You had in the 20s, gangs of roving communists and right-wingers fighting each other in the streets of Berlin, Munich. We had the beer hall putsch in Munich, where Hermann Goering got wounded, where Hitler got arrested, and that was a start. That was a start of everything that came World War II. Okay, the Versailles Treaty was the biggest seed of resentment of all, I think. Where did Hitler want the surrender of France to be? In the same car in France, in the same train car in France, that the armistice between Germany and the Allies was signed at the end of World War One. People hold grudges. Nationalities hold grudges. It's stupid to not look at how things sort of kind of mirror each other, right? That's the one thing why I love about how George Lucas wrote Star Wars. Everything was supposed to symbolize and sort of echo, not repeat exactly, but echo what happened before. And the history between World War I and World War II was that mirror effect, that echo coming back. The Germans never forgot. All right, they were humiliated. They felt they were treated unfairly. Their streets were overrun with crime. The Weimar Republic allowed all kinds of lewd, dystopian crap to go on. average middle-class Germans going, I can't do this anymore. And the Nazis, I'm going to say this, National Socialist German Workers' Party, offered to clean the streets up, to stop communism, which people were far more afraid of than they were some bunch of lunatics, racist lunatics running around. Okay. It was obvious what was going to happen. And the Brits did everything they could to avoid it. When they were the ones that the French actually were the ones that allowed it to happen. Had they gone in when Germany annexed the Saarland, or the Rhineland, in 1936, Hitler would have failed. He would have ended it right. It would have ended it right there. But they didn't, because it was politically not viable for anybody, and I think the Labour government in Britain, to stand up to him. Hermann Goering himself said if the Brits and the French had gone in to the Rhineland when they went to take it back, the Nazis would have died right there. Think about that. Because of World War I in the West, there was no will at all to fight another war. Again, 10 million men were killed in those goddamn trenches. And when you see 1917, it's going to show you the horror of what those trenches were. This is the difference. I'll leave you at this. They were using 19th century tactics with 20th century weapons. 500 yards of earth. That's all World War I was about. No bad guys on either side. And just a bunch of goofy politicians who bought into this idea of allies and that sort of realpolitik where you have spheres of influence. That's it. So staff signing out. See you around the galaxy.